Hello, everybody. Welcome to my review for Blood of Elves, which is the first novel in the Witcher Saga. It is set after the first two short story collections, which I have already reviewed. If you are interested in my reviews for them, I will link my Witcher playlist up in the info cards and also in the description down below, so you can check out the playlist. This video will be in that playlist as well, so you can just watch the playlist to get everything in the order that you're supposed to read them. As I said, this book is set after the first two short story collections, which are The Last Wish and Sword of Destiny, which I personally really liked. And so this is the first full novel. For a fantasy novel, it is quite short, but it is still interesting. But it feels like the story is mainly a lot of setup for the following books. Throughout the story, we get some build for the characters, and we get some hints as to what might happen in the saga as a whole, but we don't get to see a lot of stuff that is moving forward. There is some stuff that we see, but this really feels like this is just setting up the saga of these 5 novels. If you've seen my other reviews for the books in the series, you know that I've been saying that the characters and relationships are what makes these books stand out. And I would still say that that is true. I really like the characters and relationships. We get some more development for that, which was quite interesting. What I would say maybe as a negative for this book is the way it is structured, because it is structured in a quite unconventional way. Usually, at least for the fantasy books I have read, you always get these point of view chapters, and you kind of alternate between different point of views. But the chapters in this book are actually more like storylines. So we get one chapter that focuses on one storyline throughout, and then the next chapter is a completely new storyline that may be set after the previous chapter, but it may also be set during the previous chapter. So we don't have this back and forth between POVs. There is some back and forth between POVs in the stories themselves, but the focus is really on one storyline in each chapter, which sometimes is really cool. I feel like some chapters in this book, it was really good to focus on one thing and not to get distracted by something else. But I feel like for some chapters it was a negative effect, because it felt like a storyline, maybe it would have helped to see something else and then come back to it. So yeah, it is a bit weird, because sometimes it felt jarring, but sometimes I feel like it really helped to be immersed in the story. So I don't know how I feel about this. Maybe after I read more of these books, I will see whether I like this approach or not. But yeah, there were some chapters where I had some issues with this. But yeah, most of the time, I feel like it was quite cool to be immersed in one storyline. I rated this book 4 out of 5 stars. It doesn't quite feel like it's a whole story. This is basically a big setup for what is to come. So while I still enjoyed it, I wouldn't say it is on the level of a lot of the books I have read. So 4 out of 5 is, I think, pretty solid. As I said, the characters and relationships, if you are invested in them, you will enjoy this book. Now I will go a little bit into spoilers, so if you have not read this book, you should leave now, or you can go to the timestamp I will have on the screen right now for my final thoughts. All right, let's talk a little bit about spoilers now. So I want to talk a little bit about Ciri. So obviously this book is set after Sword of Destiny, and in the short stories, Geralt was really the main character. But I already feel like we can see that there is a slight shift, that the main character that we're going to focus on may be Ciri actually in this saga. This is something that I was expecting, because I have heard that this is kind of a complaint about these books, that you don't focus on Geralt as much as people would like. But I have to say I actually quite liked Ciri in this story. Yes, I was a bit sad that we didn't get a lot of Geralt. We got, I feel like, one chapter really where he was the main focus, and the others were either Ciri focused or focused on different things. But still, I think Ciri is an interesting character. I really like to see how she's developing as a character now that her life is essentially completely different than what she experienced in her childhood. And what I really liked is how she is built up. We see that she's growing up We see that she is getting better with her abilities. Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure if you can call her a witcher because she hasn't gone through the trial of grasses and stuff. But yeah, she at least is training like a witcher. Also, she later on in the book gets a lot of she gets taught a lot in magic. I personally really liked her training sequences with Geralt and the other witchers, and also with Triss and Yennefer, which I think were all very well done, and they were conveyed in an interesting way. Yeah, it really helped to build the relationship between Ciri and all these different characters, which is something that could be drawn upon in the future books. What I also liked were Ciri's dream sequences, but I am confused whether those will be paid off in the way or not. Yeah, I think they were quite mysterious and intriguing, but I hope that they lead somewhere. The next thing I want to talk about is the relationship between Geralt and Yennefer, which I thought was done quite interestingly in this book, because when I was going into this book, I was expecting okay, especially since we had this time jump, that we would get the Geralt, Ciri, Yennefer kind of family dynamic already, but we didn't actually get this, and I think it was quite a smart decision to keep Geralt and Yennefer apart in this book, because then you can build Ciri's relationship with each of them separately, which I feel like is a really cool way to do this. And I like how the relationships between Geralt and Yennefer and Ciri were done separately, and I feel like now Ciri has a good relationship with both of them, so it doesn't really matter what happens between Geralt and Yennefer. Ciri will still have a good relationship with both of them, which I think is a pretty neat thing to do from the author, that we don't just have Ciri who is as we see when she meets Yennefer, that she is really on Geralt's side in this whole thing, but at the end we see that she is a lot more open with Yennefer. And I have to say, after Sword of Destiny, I was really looking forward to the Geralt and Ciri stuff, but I was a bit, not really disappointed, but slightly disappointed, I would say, because I hoped that we would get a lot more between them, and we did get some stuff, but it wasn't what I was expecting. I don't know, for parts of this book, it seemed like Geralt had this kind of distanced relationship with Ciri. That obviously isn't exactly true, because when they left Kaer Morhen and we got this whole travel sequence, we saw them interacting, but I just hoped that we would get a lot more between Geralt and Ciri, which we didn't get, but we did get a lot of Yennefer and Ciri in the last chapter, and I loved those sequences. I feel like that was done extremely well. So after this book, I kind of felt like I am more invested in the Yen and Ciri relationship than I am in the Geralt and Ciri relationship, which was quite interesting. I don't know if that is done on purpose or if it is just something I feel like. Regarding Geralt and Yen's relationship, I also liked the letter that Yen sent to Geralt, which was quite sassy, let's say, where she was kind of calling out Geralt for calling her my friend, which I thought was quite well done. I liked that letter and it was quite funny. Also, something I didn't mention earlier with Ciri is I really liked her interaction with Yarpen Zigrin. They had a really interesting conversation, and I feel like Yarpen and Ciri, Yarpen is a really cool character, and I really liked that he was used in this book as well. And yeah, I hope we see more of him, and I feel like Ciri also kind of found respect for him. So another thing I think is something, again, it's mostly set up, but it's something that can lead into a lot of cool stuff later on, is this whole setup with the kings, queens, and sorcerers who are looking for Ciri. I feel like that will play a lot into the next books, especially the whole the kings and queens decided to kill Ciri, which I personally didn't understand why. They were talking about somehow getting to Ciri and then marrying her to somebody so they could have an alliance with her, but then they decided to kill her, which I didn't get how they got to that conclusion that they would have to do that. It kind of still makes sense that they would want to do that, but I don't see why marriage isn't an option anymore. So yeah, that's one of the intriguing parts, and the other part is we get this meeting between Tissaia, Wilgefortz, and Artaud, I want to say, who are three sorcerers. and they are discussing what to do with this whole situation around the politics, and also with the situation with Siri. And we find out that, or I would say, maybe, I'm not sure if they explicitly said that they were talking about Siri, but it was in the subtext that especially Wilgefortz was looking for Siri. And what was interesting is actually that Wilgefortz said to Tisaya, I think, "You mistake the stars reflected in the surface of the lake at night for the heavens." And the interesting thing is, in a dream sequence that Siri had, we heard this exact sentence, which I thought was interesting. So I'm guessing that Wilgefortz is somehow contacting Siri and talking to her, or at least influencing her dreams, which is interesting. So maybe he's close to finding her. All in all, I really liked that chapter because it gave us a lot more of an overview as to what is happening outside of just this Geralt, Ciri, and Yennefer bubble that we were following. What is happening in terms of the politics and in terms of the magicians in this world, which I think is quite a cool way to show us. And as I said, I really liked the last chapter in this book, which was really focused on Ciri and Yennefer at the Temple of Melitele, where they were training for sorcery, where Yennefer was trying to help Ciri figure out her magical abilities, which was quite interesting. And we also get this whole development of their relationship with each other. We see that Ciri in the beginning is very reluctant to trust Yennefer because she feels like Yennefer has this negative connotation, because every time Yennefer was mentioned before, Geralt would have kind of this negative reaction. So Ciri already had a negative attitude towards Yennefer in the beginning, but we see how that is broken up and how the relationship develops. And I feel like that is really the story where I think the structure really helped. I really liked being in that story for so long and just being immersed in what is happening. I think this was done quite well. I really like the Yennefer and Ciri dynamic. As I said, I may have liked it more than the Geralt and Ciri dynamic in this book. I feel like it was a cool way to end this book. So before that chapter, I was thinking okay, this is a 3.5 star book. But that chapter really put it over 2 or 4 stars. I also really like the small aspect that when Ciri is reading some books, she actually stumbles upon books by Dandelion and Essie, which I thought was quite cool, and a cool nod to Essie, who obviously died in Sword of Destiny. Yeah, I thought that was a nice nod to that character. Yeah, I think that's all I wanted to talk about for spoilers, but one thing I found really interesting is how this book ended, because when I ended this book, I already wanted to pick up the next book, but I decided to take a break because I feel like reading these books, binging these books, might make me enjoy them less, because I did have some small issues with the translation in this book. Yeah, some chapters weren't as easy to get through as I would have liked. I decided to take this series a bit slowly, but I really liked how this book ended. Let me read you actually the last passage of what was happening. Alright, so essentially in this situation, Yennefer and Ciri are leaving the Temple of Melitele. Ciri is essentially saying goodbye to Mother Nenneke. So I'll read the passage now. Mother Nenneke is talking. "Take care," she repeated. "Bad times are approaching. It might turn out to be true what Ithlinni Ivanian knew, what she predicted. The time of the sword and axe is approaching, the time of contempt and the wolf's blizzard. Take care of her, Yennefer. Don't let anyone harm her." "I'll be back, Mother," said Ciri, leaping into her saddle. "I'll be back for sure. Soon." She did not know how very wrong she was. And that's how this book ends, with this cliffhanger that essentially it gives you this ominous feeling that something bad is about to happen, which is obviously something that if you've been reading these predictions that we get before every chapter, that it seems like, yeah, something bad is going to happen. Yeah, this whole thing it made me feel like I need to find out what's happening and what will happen to these characters, and I still really want to find out. After reading this again, I really am feeling like picking this up again. But as I said, I decided not to go into the next book directly. I'll talk about this a bit more in my final thoughts. That's all for spoilers. For my final thoughts, I still like this book. I don't think it is amazing. I wouldn't call it a great book. I think this is a good book that has some great passages, but it also has some just okay passages. I don't think it's bad at any point, but yeah, I wouldn't say it is as good as the high points of the short stories, but I would say the last chapter in this book may actually be as good as the best short story. I would say the book overall isn't great, but it is still good, and I would still recommend that you read the series. But I would for sure recommend that you start with The Last Wish, because I think the fact that I already was invested in these characters and I already had seen some relationship dynamics in the short stories, that really helped me to enjoy the book and really care about these characters. So yeah, I would for sure say don't start with this book. Start with The Last Wish, then read Sword of Destiny, then go into Blood of Elves. So yeah, that's my opinion on that. I already talked a little in my spoiler section about the fact that I am not planning to go into the next book immediately. It's been some time since I finished Blood of Elves. I decided to take some time between these books because I had slight issues with the translation at some points. At some points it's great, you don't feel like it's translated at all, but sometimes it feels like it's a bit jarring. And I don't want to burn out on this story because I feel like I really like these characters and care about the relationships with each other. So yeah, that's why I decided not to go into Time of Contempt immediately, but I will go into it and I will review it, so look out for that. I hope you liked this video. If you did, leave a like, leave a subscribe. Check out my other videos. Some of them should have shown up on the screen right now. I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.